The slave markets of Velthra Prime were the largest in the known universe. Every day, thousands of creatures from hundreds of different worlds were bought and sold in its massive black halls. The walls were made of a strange dark stone that seemed to eat light. The air smelled of fear and despair. Taeho stood in a long line of prisoners, his hands bound with energy chains that burned if he moved too much. He was a simple man from Earth, 28 years old, with messy black hair and tired eyes. Until 3 weeks ago, he had been a maintenance worker on a small mining station near Jupiter. His job was to fix broken pipes, repair electrical systems, and make sure the air recyclers kept working. It was boring work, but it was honest. Then the aliens came. They attacked the station without warning. Taeho remembered the sirens, the screaming, the strange ships that cut through the station's walls like paper. He remembered running, hiding, and then the blue light that took away his consciousness. When he woke up, he was on a ship with hundreds of other humans, all heading to a place none of them had ever heard of. Now he was here, waiting to be sold like an animal. The alien slavers walked up and down the line, examining their merchandise. They were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms. Their eyes were completely black, and when they smiled, Taeho could see rows of sharp teeth. They carried devices that scanned each prisoner, recording their species, health, and potential value. When they reached Taeho, they barely stopped. Human male, one of them said in a bored voice. Class 7 species. No special abilities. Average physical condition. Recommended for basic labor. The other slaver laughed. Humans are worthless. We will be lucky to get 10 credits for this one. Taeho said nothing. He had learned quickly that speaking only made things worse. The bruise on his face was proof of that lesson. The auction began an hour later. The hall filled with buyers of all shapes and sizes. Some were humanoid, others were so strange that Taeho's mind could not understand what he was seeing. There were creatures made of fire, beings that floated without bodies, and things that existed in more dimensions than 3. One by one, the prisoners were brought to the central platform and sold. The valuable ones went for millions of credits. Warriors, scientists, beings with rare abilities, they were all taken by wealthy buyers who saw them as investments. When Taeho's turn came, the auctioneer did not even try to make him sound impressive. Next item, the auctioneer announced. Human male. Good for cleaning, basic repairs, simple tasks. Starting bid, 5 credits. A few buyers laughed. 5 credits was nothing. It was the price of a cheap meal. 5 credits, someone called out lazily. 6, another added. Sounding bored. Taeho stood on the platform, looking at the crowd without expression. He had already accepted his fate. He would be bought by someone, forced to work until he died, and forgotten. That was the reality of his situation. There was no point in hoping for anything else. Then everything changed. The massive doors at the back of the hall suddenly opened, and a cold wind swept through the room. Taeho felt the temperature drop so fast that he could see his breath forming clouds in front of his face. The buyers, who had been talking and laughing, went completely silent. Every single creature in the hall dropped to their knees, pressing their faces to the ground. Even the slavers knelt, their forearms trembling with fear. Taeho did not understand what was happening. He looked around, confused, as a group of figures entered the hall. They were soldiers of some kind, wearing armor that seemed to be made of frozen light. They moved in perfect formation, their footsteps making no sound. And behind them walked a woman. At least, she looked like a woman. She was tall and slim, with skin so pale it was almost white. Her hair was long and silver, flowing behind her like a river of moonlight. She wore a dress made of something that looked like liquid darkness, and her eyes were silver mirrors that reflected nothing. She was beautiful in a way that made Taeho's heart hurt. But it was not a warm beauty. It was the beauty of winter, of frozen lakes, of the silence between stars. Looking at her felt like looking at death itself. This was Empress Yura of the Void Throne. Taiho had never heard of her before. He did not know that she ruled 11 galaxies. He did not know that she had lived for 6,000 years. He did not know that her word could create or destroy entire civilizations. He did not know that she was called the Coldest, because no emotion had ever touched her face. All he knew was that everyone around him was terrified, and that this woman was walking directly toward him. The Empress moved through the hall slowly, her silver eyes scanning the kneeling crowd. She passed generals who had conquered planets. She passed rare specimens worth billions of credits. She passed creatures of immense power who could destroy worlds with a thought. She did not look at any of them. She stopped in front of the auction platform, where Taiho still stood because no one had told him to kneel. He looked down at her, and she looked up at him. Their eyes met. Taiho did not know what he was supposed to do. Everyone else was on the ground, but it felt strange to kneel now. Too late, too fake. So he just stood there, looking at her, waiting. 5 seconds passed. 10 seconds. 15. The silence was so complete that Taiho could hear his own heartbeat. Then the Empress spoke. Her voice was soft, but it carried through the entire hall like the sound of ice cracking. "This one," she said. The auctioneer lifted his head from the ground, his face showing pure confusion. Your Imperial Majesty," he stammered. "This is just a human. A Class 7 species. He has no value, no abilities, no. Did I ask for your opinion?" The auctioneer's mouth closed so fast that Taiho heard his teeth click together. "Ah, no, Your Majesty? Then bring him to my ship." She turned and walked away without another word. Her soldiers followed her, and within moments she was gone. The cold faded. The silence broke, and every creature in the hall started talking at once. Taiho was grabbed by the slavers and pulled off the platform. They did not hit him or insult him anymore. They handled him carefully, almost gently, as if he had become something precious and fragile. "What is happening?" Taiho asked. "Who was that?" One of the slavers looked at him with an expression Taiho could not read. Was it fear? Pity? Amazement? "That was Empress Yura," the slaver said. "She rules the Void Empire. She has not attended a slave auction in 300 years. She has never, in all of history, purchased anything from these markets." The slaver paused, his black eyes studying Taiho as if seeing him for the first time. "And she chose you. A worthless human. I do not know if you are the luckiest creature in the universe, or the most doomed." Taiho did not know either. As he was led toward the Empress's ship, he thought about the way she had looked at him. Those silver eyes had held no warmth, no cruelty, no anything he could understand. But there had been something in that gaze. Something that felt like recognition. Like she had been looking for him. Like she had finally found him. The ship was cold inside. Colder than anything Taiho had ever experienced. But somehow, deep in his chest, he felt a small spark of warmth. Something was beginning. He did not know what, but he knew, with a certainty he could not explain, that his life would never be the same again. The Void Palace existed in a place that was not really a place. It floated between dimensions, outside of normal space and time. When Taiho first saw it through the ship's window, his brain could not fully understand what he was looking at. The palace was enormous, bigger than any city on Earth, bigger than some moons. It was made of something that looked like black crystal, but the crystal moved and shifted like it was alive. Towers reached up into empty darkness. Ridges connected buildings that seemed to be miles apart. And everywhere, there was cold light that came from nowhere and cast no shadows. But the strangest thing was the silence. When Taiho stepped off the ship and into the palace, He felt like someone had stuffed cotton into his ears. Sound did not travel properly here. His footsteps made almost no noise. His breath was barely a whisper. The silence pressed against him from all sides, heavy and thick. A guard led him through endless hallways. They passed other beings, servants, soldiers, officials, but no one spoke. Everyone moved in quiet efficiency, their eyes looking straight ahead, their faces showing nothing. Taiho was brought to a small room in a distant wing of the palace. The room was simple: a bed, a table, a chair, a small bathroom. The walls were smooth and gray. There was no window. "You will stay here," the guard said. "Someone will bring food. Do not leave unless called." Then the guard left, and Taiho was alone. Days passed. No one came to explain anything. No one told him why the Empress had chosen him. No one gave him clothes or work or purpose. Food appeared outside his door twice a day, strange but edible things that he could not identify. He ate, he slept, he stared at the walls. The silence was the hardest part. On Earth, there was always sound. Machines humming, people talking, wind blowing. Here, there was nothing. Just the endless, pressing quiet that seemed to want to crush him. Taiho started talking to himself, just to hear a voice. On the seventh day, a servant came to his room. "The Empress will see you," the servant said. "Follow me." Taiho followed. They walked for what felt like hours, through halls and chambers of increasing grandeur. The deeper they went into the palace, the more impressive everything became. The walls turned from simple gray to intricate patterns of gold and silver. The floors changed from plain stone to polished crystal. The air grew colder with every step. Finally, they reached a massive door made of something that looked like frozen starlight. The servant bowed and stepped aside. "Enter," a voice said from inside. It was the Empress's voice. Taiho pushed the door open and stepped through. The throne room was the largest space he had ever seen. The ceiling was so high that it disappeared into darkness. The floor was a mirror that reflected a sky full of dying stars. And at the far end of the room, on a throne carved from bones that were too large to belong to any normal creature, sat Empress Yura. She was not alone. Around her stood dozens of beings, advisors, generals, officials. They were all powerful, ancient, important. They looked at Taiho with expressions ranging from confusion to disgust. To them, he was nothing, less than nothing, an insect that had somehow wandered into the presence of a god. Taiho walked across the mirror floor, his reflection walking beneath him. His footsteps echoed in the vast space, the only sound in the silence. He stopped a respectful distance from the throne and waited. The Empress studied him with her silver eyes. Her face showed nothing. "Tell me," she said finally, "why you did not kneel." The court gasped. Whispers broke out among the advisors. To not kneel before the Empress was a crime punishable by death. Everyone knew this. Taiho thought about the question carefully before answering. "I did not know I was supposed to," he said. "No one told me. And by the time I realized everyone else was kneeling, it felt too late. If I knelt then, it would have looked fake. I do not like doing things that are fake." More whispers, more shocked expressions. One of the generals, a creature made of living fire, stepped forward with anger burning in his flames. "Your Majesty, this creature insults you with his words. Let me teach him proper respect." Silence. The single word from the Empress made the general freeze. The fire in his body dimmed until it was barely a glow. "Return to your place," she commanded. The general obeyed immediately. His head bowed in submission. Empress Yura turned her attention back to Taiho. And then something impossible happened. The corner of her mouth moved. Just slightly. Just a tiny bit. It was not a smile, but it was close. It was the ghost of an expression that had not existed on her face for thousands of years. Genuine, she repeated his word. You did not want to seem fake. Tell me, human, when did anyone last concern themselves with being genuine before me? Tai-Ho did not know how to answer that question. The Empress waved her hand, and the court began to leave. Generals, advisors, officials, they all filed out of the throne room in orderly silence, casting confused glances at the human as they passed. Within minutes, Tai-Ho and the Empress were alone. She stood from her throne and walked toward him. Up close, she was even more beautiful and even more terrifying. Her skin seemed to glow with inner light. Her silver hair floated slightly, as if moved by a wind that did not exist. Her eyes were mirrors that showed Tai-Ho his own reflection, small and scared. I have ruled for 6,000 years, she said. I have watched empires rise and fall like waves on a shore. I have destroyed worlds and created new ones. Every being I have ever known has wanted something from me. Power, favor, survival. They smile and they bow, and they say what they think I want to hear. They perform. They calculate. They kneel. She stopped in front of him, close enough that he could feel the cold radiating from her body. But you, she continued, you are too small to want anything I have. Too insignificant to scheme. When you looked at me in that auction hall, you did not see an empress. You did not see power or danger or opportunity. You just saw a woman. Her silver eyes searched his face. Do you know how long it has been since anyone has looked at me and seen just a woman? Tai-Ho swallowed. His mouth was dry. I'm sorry if I offended you. You did not offend me. You surprised me. And I have not been surprised in 3,000 years. I have not been surprised in 3,000 years. She turned and walked back toward her throne, but she did not sit. Instead, she looked up at the dark ceiling, at the endless void above. I am called the Coldest, she said. Do you know why? Because you show no emotion? Tai-Ho guessed. Because I feel no emotion. Or so I believed. For 6,000 years, I have felt nothing. No joy, no anger, no sadness, no love. I thought those feelings had died in me long ago, frozen by time and power and loneliness. She turned back to look at him. But when I saw you standing there, refusing to kneel, looking at me with those simple, honest eyes, I felt something. A small flicker in my chest. I do not know what it was. Curiosity, perhaps. Or something else. She walked back to her throne and sat down. You will stay in this palace, she announced. You will not be a servant or a slave. You will simply be here. I want to understand what I felt when I looked at you. I want to understand why a worthless human from a worthless planet made me feel anything at all. Tai-Ho did not know what to say. His life had just changed completely, and he did not understand any of it. Do I have a choice? He asked. The Empress almost smiled again. No, she said. You do not. But I think, in time, you will not want one. She was right. Months passed in the Void Palace, and Tai-Ho slowly learned how to live in this strange new world. His role was never clearly defined. He was not a servant. Servants had duties and schedules and masters. He was not a prisoner. He could go almost anywhere in the palace he wanted. He was not an advisor or an official. He had no power, no title, no responsibilities. He simply existed, floating through the days like a ghost. But Tai-Ho was not the kind of person who could do nothing. Back on Earth, on the mining station, he had always needed to keep his hands busy. Fixing things, building things, making things work. That was who he was. That was how he understood the world. So he started fixing things in the palace. It began small. A light fixture in the hallway near his room was broken, flickering on and off in an annoying pattern. The servants ignored it. There were more important things to worry about than one broken light. But Taiho could not ignore it. After 3 days of watching it flicker, he found some tools and fixed it himself. Then he noticed a door that did not close properly. Then, a water system that made strange noises. Then, a heating unit that had not worked in centuries. No one stopped him. The servants watched him with confusion at first, then with something like respect. This strange human, chosen by the Empress, for unknown reasons, spent his days crawling through maintenance tunnels and repairing ancient machines. It made no sense to them, but they let him continue. The palace began to change. Lights that had been dark for 1,000 years started working again. Doors opened smoothly. The air circulation improved, and slowly, almost unnoticeably, the palace grew warmer. Empress Yura noticed. She started summoning Taiho to her private chambers, not the grand throne room, but a smaller space where she spent her time between audiences. At first, she only gave him commands. Fix this. Look at that. Explain how this works. But then the commands became questions. What is this tool used for? How do you know which wire connects to which? Why does repairing things make you happy? And then the questions became conversations. Taiho learned to talk to the Empress like she was a normal person. It was not easy at first. She was ancient and powerful and terrifying. But she seemed to want him to treat her normally, so he tried. He told her about Earth, about the blue sky and the green trees and the way rain smelled when it fell on hot pavement. He told her about his mother, who had died when he was young, and his father, who had worked too hard and never smiled. He told her about the mining station, about the long shifts and the bad food and the tiny pleasures that made life bearable. She listened to everything. Her silver eyes never left his face. She asked questions that showed she was paying attention, remembering, caring. And slowly, she started talking too. She told him about the early days of her empire when she was young and full of fire. She told him about the war she had fought, the enemies she had destroyed, the friends she had lost. She told him about the loneliness that had grown inside her over thousands of years, freezing her heart until she could not feel anything anymore. I used to love music, she said one evening, as they sat together in her chambers. When I was young, before I became Empress, I would sing. I had a beautiful voice. Everyone said so. Do you still sing? Taiho asked. No, I have not sung in 5,000 years. I forgot how. Maybe you could learn again. She looked at him with an expression he could not read. Perhaps, she said. Perhaps. The court noticed the changes. Rumors spread through the palace like fire. The Empress was spending time with the human. The Empress was talking to the human. The Empress had smiled, actually smiled, while the human was telling her a story about rain. The generals and advisors did not understand. This human was nothing, a Class 7 species from a primitive planet with no power, no abilities, no value. Why did the Empress care about him? What was his secret? What was he planning? Admiral Hayek was the most suspicious of all. Hayek was the commander of the Third Fleet, one of the most powerful military forces in the Empire. He was made of living flame, a being of pure fire that burned with ambition and pride. He had served the Empress for 800 years, leading her armies to countless victories. He was loyal, capable, and utterly convinced of his own importance, and he hated Taiho. The human was an insult to everything Hayek believed in. Power should be earned through strength and skill, not given randomly to worthless creatures. The Empress's attention was a prize that should go to those who deserved it, warriors, leaders, beings of greatness, not a maintenance worker who fixed broken lights. Hayek demanded an audience with the Empress. Your Majesty, he said, his flames burning bright with barely controlled anger. I must speak to you about the human. The Empress sat on her throne, her face as cold as ever. Speak. This creature is a danger to the Empire. He has no place here. Our enemies see your interest in him as a weakness. They whisper that the Coldest has grown soft. They plan and scheme, waiting for an opportunity to strike. And what would you have me do? Send him away. Or better, let me dispose of him quietly. No one would question it. No one would care. The air in the throne room grew colder. Ice formed on the walls. Hyok's flames dimmed despite his efforts to keep them burning. You speak of weakness, the Empress said, her voice soft and dangerous. Tell me, Admiral, when did you last win a war without my direct intervention? When did you last make a decision that I did not approve? When did you last do anything that was truly yours? Hyok could not answer. His flames were barely flickering now, suppressed by the Empress's power. This human has asked nothing of me, she continued. He fears nothing from me. He does not bow and scrape and tell me what I want to hear. In 6,000 years, he's the only being in my empire who treats me as if I am real. As if I am a person, not just a throne. She stood, and the temperature dropped so fast that frost appeared on Hyok's armor. You call that weakness? You think caring about someone makes me less powerful? Your Majesty, I did not mean. You did mean. You meant every word. You think the human is beneath me, and therefore my interest in him makes me lesser. But you are wrong, Admiral. You are so very wrong. She walked toward him, and with every step, the cold grew more intense. Strength is not about never caring. Strength is about choosing what to care about and protecting it with everything you have. The human matters to me. I have decided this. And anyone who threatens what matters to me will learn exactly how strong I can be. She stopped in front of him, looking up at his diminished flames. Leave this room. Leave this palace. Return to your fleet and do your job. And never speak of the human again. If I hear that you have moved against him, if I hear that you have even looked at him with hostile intent, I will unmake you. Slowly. Painfully. Completely. Hyok bowed as low as his body would allow. Double quotes. Yes, Your Majesty. He fled from the throne room, his flames slowly returning as he got farther from the Empress's presence. That night, Taiho came to the Empress's chambers, as usual. She seemed tired, which was strange. He had never seen her tired before. Is everything okay? He asked. She looked at him for a long moment. Yes, she said finally. Everything is fine. Tell me more about rain. I want to understand why you miss it so much. Taiho sat down and started talking, describing the sound of rain on a metal roof, the smell of wet earth, the way children would run outside and dance in puddles. The Empress listened, and for just a moment, her silver eyes seemed a little less cold. The palace grew warmer still. The assassins came on a night without stars. 12 of them, each one a master of death, moved through the Void Palace like shadows. They were not from the Empire. They came from the Shadow Consortium, an alliance of 5 powerful civilizations that had lived under Empress Yura's rule for centuries and hated every moment of it. The Consortium had been planning this for a long time. They knew they could not kill the Empress directly. She was too powerful, too ancient, too protected. But they had been watching. They had seen her change. They had noticed how her attention kept returning to one small, worthless human. Kill the human. Their leaders reasoned, and the Empress would break. Her strange new feelings would turn to grief, then madness. And in that madness, they would find their opportunity. The assassins bypassed every security measure in the palace. They had spent decades learning its secrets, bribing servants, studying patrol patterns. They knew exactly where Taiho slept. They knew exactly how to reach him. At midnight, they gathered outside his door. The leader of the group was a being called Shade, a creature made of living darkness. He could move through walls, become invisible, kill without leaving a trace. He had ended the lives of kings and emperors. This would be easy. He slid through the door like smoke and approached the bed where the human was sleeping. But Taiho was not sleeping. He had woken up moments earlier, feeling something wrong in the air. The temperature had changed. The silence had become different, heavier, more threatening. On the mining station, Taiho had learned to trust his instincts. When something felt wrong, it usually was. He opened his eyes just as Shade reached for him. For a moment, they stared at each other, the human and the assassin. Shade was surprised. He had not expected the target to be awake. But it did not matter. What could a worthless human do against him? Taiho moved. He did not have weapons. He did not have powers. He did not have training in combat. But he had worked on machinery his entire life. His hands were fast and his reflexes were good. On the table next to his bed was a heating panel he had been repairing. It was heavy, made of metal, with sharp edges. Taiho grabbed it and threw it at Shade's head with all his strength. The panel passed through the shadow creature without effect. Shade was not solid enough to be hurt by physical objects. But the movement made noise. And the noise gave Taiho 3 seconds. 3 seconds to roll off the bed. 3 seconds to run toward the door. 3 seconds to scream, "Help! Assassins!" His voice echoed through the silent palace. Guards who had been stationed nearby came running. Alarms began to sound. The other 11 assassins, who had been waiting outside, burst into the room. Taiho was trapped. He backed against the wall, facing 12 deadly killers. They carried weapons that could destroy cities. They had abilities that could break reality. And he had nothing except his bare hands and his racing heart. "Kill him quickly," Shade ordered, "before she comes." But it was already too late. The wall behind the assassins did not break or explode. It simply stopped existing. Reality folded in on itself, creating an opening where there had been solid stone moments before. And through that opening stepped Empress Yura. She was not the woman Taiho had come to know. She was not the quiet, lonely soul who listened to his stories about rain and asked questions about how machines worked. She was something else entirely. Her form was shifting, unstable, terrible. Her body seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, parts of her flickering in and out of visibility. Her silver eyes had become windows into absolute void, not darkness, but the complete absence of everything. Cold radiated from her in waves so intense that the air itself began to freeze. This was the Coldest. This was the being who had ruled 11 galaxies for 6,000 years. This was death. The assassins did not even have time to turn around. One moment they were there, solid and alive and dangerous. The next moment they were simply gone. Not killed killing left bodies. They were unmade, erased from existence. Their atoms scattered across dimensions. Their very souls torn apart and dispersed into the void. It happened in less than a heartbeat. Then there was silence. Empress Yura stood in the middle of the room, her form slowly stabilizing back to something humanoid. The terrible void in her eyes faded, replaced by silver mirrors once again. The cold began to recede. She looked at Taiho. "You are hurt," she said. Taiho looked down at his arm. There was a cut there. One of the assassins must have grazed him in the chaos. Blood dripped onto the floor. "It is nothing," he said. His voice was shaking. "Are you okay?" She stared at him. This man had just watched her destroy 12 beings with a thought. He had seen her true form, the monster beneath the beautiful mask. He had witnessed power that could end worlds, and his first concern was whether she was okay. Something cracked inside Empress Yura, something that had been frozen for thousands of years. She felt it break, felt warmth flood into spaces that had been cold for so long she had forgotten they existed. "Why do you ask about me?" she whispered. You were the one in danger. You were the one they came to kill. Because you looked scared, Taiho said simply. When you came through that wall, just for a moment, you looked scared. Not of them, of something else. He was right. She had been scared. Not of the assassins. They were nothing to her. She had been scared that she would be too late. Scared that she would arrive and find him already dead. Scared that she would lose this strange, wonderful human who had made her feel alive again. I am going to do something, she said slowly, her voice carrying a weight that made the air tremble. And I need you to understand why. What are you going to do? She walked toward him, stepping over the spots where the assassins had stood moments before. She reached out and touched his injured arm, and the cut healed instantly, the skin closing as if it had never been damaged. They came for you because of me, she said. Because I care about you. In their eyes, that caring is a weakness they can exploit. They thought that hurting you would hurt me. Were they right? She met his eyes. Yes, if they had killed you tonight, I do not know what I would have done. I might have destroyed their entire civilization. I might have torn reality itself apart. You have become very important to me, Taiho. More important than I ever intended. He did not know what to say. His heart was beating fast, and not just from fear. So I am going to make sure this never happens again, she continued. I am going to make sure that every being in the universe knows what will happen if they touch you. If they threaten you. If they even think about harming you. How? She smiled a real smile, warm and genuine. The first true smile she had worn in 6,000 years. I am going to make the universe kneel, she said. And I am going to tell them why. She took his hand in hers. Her skin was cold, but somehow the touch felt warm. Come with me, she said. I want you there when I change everything. Taiho followed her. He did not understand what was about to happen, but he trusted her. And that, he was beginning to realize, was the most human thing he had ever done. The next morning, Empress Yura summoned every leader in the known universe. She did not send messages or invitations. She did not ask diplomats to arrange meetings. She simply reached out with her power and pulled them all into a space that existed outside of normal reality. A vast empty dimension where her will was absolute. Law, trillions of beings watched. Through connections their leaders carried. Every civilization, every planet, every colony with access to communication technology saw what happened next. The space was infinite and empty, filled with soft gray light that came from everywhere and nowhere. In the center stood a platform of solid nothing, and on that platform stood Empress Yura. She was not wearing her usual dark dress. Instead, she wore simple white robes, bright against the gray emptiness. Her silver hair flowed freely. Her face was calm and cold and beautiful. Beside her stood Taiho. He was still wearing borrowed clothes. His own had been damaged in the attack. He looked small and ordinary and completely out of place among the assembled powers of the universe. He was the only being in the space who was not a ruler, a leader, or a force of cosmic importance. Thought he was just a human. The leaders of the universe looked at him with confusion, suspicion, and contempt. Who was this creature? Why was he standing next to the Empress? What possible importance could he have? Empress Yura raised her hand, and the whispered conversation stopped instantly. For 6,000 years, she began, her voice carrying across the infinite space without effort. I have ruled through fear, through power, through the certainty that I could destroy anyone who opposed me. You have all knelt before me, because you had no choice. Your obedience was born from terror, not respect. Your loyalty was a survival strategy, nothing more. She paused, letting her words sink in. I accepted this. I believed that fear was the only reliable foundation for an empire. I believed that caring was weakness and that coldness was strength. I froze my heart because I thought a frozen heart could not be broken. She looked at the assembled rulers, beings of fire and shadow, creatures of pure energy, living machines and ancient gods. They had all served her for centuries. They had all feared her. None of them had ever known her. I was wrong. The whispers started again, but Empress Yura ignored them. This human was attacked last night. Not because of anything he has done. Not because he threatens anyone. He was attacked because he matters to me. My enemies saw my caring as a weakness to exploit. Her silver eyes hardened. They were right that I care. They were wrong about what that means. She raised her hand, and images appeared in the air around the platform. Images of Earth blue and green and beautiful, spinning in its yellow sun. Images of human colonies scattered across the solar system. Images of human faces, human cities, human lives. From this moment forward, the Empress announced, humanity is under my complete protection. Earth, its colonies, its people, all of them. Any being who harms a human will answer to me personally. Any empire that threatens them will cease to exist. This is not a request. This is not a negotiation. This is fact. The leaders of the universe shifted uncomfortably. Some looked angry. Some looked confused. A few looked terrified. Your Majesty, one brave ruler spoke up, a queen of a civilization that controlled dozens of star systems. Humanity is a Class 7 species. They have no power, no importance, no value. Why would you value? The Empress's voice cut through the air like ice. Let me tell you about value. She turned to look at Taiho, and her expression softened in a way that shocked everyone watching. This human fixed broken lights in my palace. Not because anyone asked him to. Not because he would be rewarded. Simply because he saw something broken and wanted to make it work again. He talked to me about rain and sunshine and the smell of his mother's cooking. He looked at the most powerful being in the universe and saw a lonely woman who had forgotten how to smile. She turned back to face the assembled rulers. In 6,000 years, not one of you has ever seen me as a person. Not one of you has ever asked how I feel, what I think, what I dream. You saw only power, only the throne, only something to fear or use or appease. Her voice carried across galaxies. This worthless human from a worthless planet, his words, not mine, showed me more genuine care in a few months than all of you have shown in millennia combined. He does not kneel to me. He never has. And yet he is more loyal, more honest, more real than any of you could ever be. She stepped forward, and the platform beneath her feet expanded outward, growing larger as her presence filled the space. So I give you all a choice. Continue as you have been scheming, fearing, kneeling only when you must. And I will rule you as I always have, with cold power and absolute control. Or learn what this human taught me. Learn that there is more to existence than power. Learn that caring is not weakness. Learn that connection and warmth can exist alongside strength. She raised both hands, and power radiated from her in waves that made reality itself tremble. Either way, understand this. The universe will kneel to protect him, because I will kneel to protect him. And there is nothing in all of creation colder than my love. Silence. The rulers of the universe looked at each other, uncertain what to do. Never in history had the coldest Empress spoken like this. Never had she shown anything resembling emotion. And never had she declared such absolute protection over something so small and insignificant. Then, slowly, one by one, the most powerful beings in existence began to bow. Not entirely in fear. There was something else there, too. Something like understanding, something like respect, something like hope. If even the coldest Empress could change, could learn to feel again, could find connection and warmth after 6,000 years of isolation. Maybe the universe was not as cold as they had believed. When the last ruler had bowed, Empress Yura turned to Taiho. The power faded from her form. The cosmic majesty dimmed. She was just a woman again, standing next to a man, surrounded by an infinite space that suddenly felt intimate and small. "That was a lot," Taiho said quietly. "Do you want to get something to eat?" For a moment, Empress Yura just looked at him. This human who had watched her command the universe, who had seen her at her most powerful and her most vulnerable, who had been the cause of the most dramatic declaration in galactic history, and his first thought was about food. She laughed. It was not a small laugh or a polite laugh. It was a real laugh, full and warm and wonderful, a sound that no one in the universe had ever heard before. It echoed across the infinite space, reaching every ruler who had bowed, every civilization that was watching. The Coldest Empress was laughing. "Yes," she said, when she could speak again. "I think I would like that very much." She took his hand, and reality folded around them, carrying them back to the Void Palace. The assembled rulers remained in that infinite space for a moment longer, processing what they had witnessed. Then they returned to their own worlds, their own empires, their own lives, carrying with them a truth they would never forget. Humanity was special, not because of strength or technology or power. Humans were special because they could look at the coldest heart in the universe and see someone worth knowing. They could stand before absolute power and offer simple kindness. They could change everything just by being real. And from that day forward, throughout the 11 galaxies of the Void Empire and beyond, humans were treated with respect. Not because they were feared, not because they were powerful, but because a single human had once made an ancient Empress remember what it meant to be alive. And in the palace that was no longer quite so cold, Empress Yura and Taiho sat together in her chambers, eating strange alien food and talking about rain. "I want to see it someday," she said. "This rain you always talk about." "Then let us go to Earth," Taiho replied. "I will show you everything. The rain, the sunshine, the way clouds move across the sky. I will show you the world I came from." She smiled easily now, naturally, as if she had been smiling her whole life. "I would like that," she said. "I would like that very much." Outside the palace, stars burned in the void, galaxies spun in their eternal dance, and the universe continued its endless expansion. But somewhere in all that vast cold emptiness, there was warmth. And it was enough.